Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Brian Athey, the president of Congressional Capital. I'm excited today to have Hannah McCann with us, who is at Feldman Ruel, who I've gotten to know through one of my own projects. Hannah, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you, Brian?
Doing great. Great to see you. The reason I brought Hannah on today is that I have found Hannah to be a phenomenal broker. We have dealt with is a building that I own in Prince George's County, Maryland, that is a flex industrial building, not something that I own a lot of. I bought it because a then borrower and friend of mine was my tenant. And then when he moved out, I was in a position where I had to lease an asset class that I wasn't all that familiar with. And so through my friend Ian Rule, found Hannah, and Hannah did an excellent job. And so now I have Hannah on, but I want to learn more about you and about your background. So, Hannah, where are you from? And tell me your educational background and kind of the overview of how you got to be doing what you're doing today.
I think my path is a little bit atypical for this industry. So proud to say I'm a DC native. I've lived in this city my whole life. And I think that has a lot to do with why I'm in this industry. I was a humanities major in college, and basically that meant I was pretty good at writing and
Hmm.
communication. Didn't have a lot of direction other than that. So my first job was in marketing
Where
and
did you go to
communication,
college?
Georgetown.
Oh, great. Wow. So
So,
you're highly educated.
yep.
Did you grow up in the actual city or in the suburbs?
I grew up, my mom lived in Tacoma Park, Maryland. My dad lived in
Yep.
Tacoma, DC.
Oh,
So
cool.
right on the border right there. Took the subway into school, into the city every day for school, for high school, and
Wow.
then
Where'd you go to
stayed
high
in town.
school?
Edmund Burke.
Great. Awesome. So you
Yeah.
really are a true blue DC native. Do
Yeah.
you live in the city today or no?
No, I live in Silver Spring, right over the
Great.
line. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So I worked for the American Institute of Architects out of
Hmm.
college, covering local architecture and design. And it was such an exciting time, Brian. Did you live in the area? Have you lived in the area your whole life?
So I have lived in the area most of my life. I grew up in Haymarket, Virginia, in the country. I, graduated from the University of Virginia, went to William and Mary Law School, clerked for a federal judge, worked for a law firm here in Falls Church, Reed Smith, and really have lived here. Other than 1 year away, lived here my whole life.
I just think it's amazing how much this area has changed in that time. And in
Well,
particular, in the 90s, when Anthony Williams was mayor, there were just so many cranes in the air and parts of town that I had known my whole life, 14th Street, U Street, everything was changing. Some things were staying the same. I mean, you still have Ben's Chili Bowl, but just to watch these buildings that had been vacant forever be transformed. And I was we started a magazine covering development. And so I was meeting and touring and writing about the teams of architects, developers, tenants, all these people coming together with the vision.
it was an amazing time. In fact, I had the good fortune of being on a bank board with Jim Abdo, who was one of the
Oh, wow.
people, who really, took a
Yes,
risk, on 14th and, bought some real estate down there and did small stuff and then bigger stuff and still owns a bunch of real estate downtown and is really a wonderful person and was a trailblazer back in the day. I know he and
absolutely.
he and Mayor Williams are really good friends to this day. And Tony Williams did a great job, like helping bring business and bring energy into the city. And the '90s were certainly a time like that. I was a bit young to see that myself, although my father was doing some hard money lending, in the early '90s, back when Adams Morgan. He used to tell me stories about going to Adams Morgan and like ducking bullets while he was doing hard money
Yeah.
loans. And but things were really turning over. And so no, certain things certainly changed. And then, you had the great kind of recession, and then I really was a part of it booming right after that. And that was another really exciting time in the city.
Mm.
But you started off covering that kind of the excitement of the '90s, huh?
Yeah, and it really planted a seed where I wished I could kind of be part of the team that was making those things happen. My career went off into journalism and I went on to work for a national architecture magazine. But like a lot of people in COVID, I had a moment to step back and just kind of look at, okay, what am I doing? Why? What do I want to be doing? I also
Hmm.
had a unique opportunity I think you'll appreciate as a parent where my kids were just about to be old enough that, I wasn't going to be tied to my minivan, driving them everywhere after school and on the weekends. And maybe a small window was opening up where mom could kind of do what she wants to do. What would that
Yeah.
be? And I decided I wanted to maybe try to enter the field. Took baby steps, talked to a lot of people, and got licensed. I knew I wanted to work in the field, but I didn't see any firms who were doing the work the way that I would want to be doing it. And I thought about maybe partnering with a developer, like somebody like
Hmm.
an Abdo, and trying to work on the ground with them in acquisition or leasing. And then Feldman Rule launched right around the same
Uh-huh.
time. And instantly it was clear to me that they were different than the other firms who were out there. Number one, with just the way that they package and market the properties that we
Hmm.
list. They're finally, I feel like, harnessing all the information that's available to us at this time in history
Yep.
and organizing it and compiling it and delivering it to the buyer instead of just offering kind of like a flimsy sketch of what this opportunity is. They're professionally photographing the buildings and putting the materials together. There's no firewall to access the materials. They're blasting it,
Yep.
wide and far to a
Yep.
wide audience. And it was the kind of properties that really excite me, which are sub-institutional, older stock, a lot of Class C, industrial development sites, retail that
Yep.
has sat underutilized for many years. That's the stuff that totally fires me up.
Yeah,
And
the kind of stuff you saw
yeah.
that was making the transition in the 90s and that we all saw make the transition from, the 2010 to 2020, through COVID. And really
Yeah.
the kind of stuff that I know Ian Rule, one of the two founders of Feldman Rule cut his teeth on, I mean, he was doing that for years and years. And really anybody who's done the small kind of urban infill stuff in DC knows Ian. Ian was a great college hockey player and has a very competitive background. And I think that competitive nature, is good for brokerage and kind of lifts the boat up as you guys go.
Hmm.
In terms of your marketing today, obviously one of the topics of interest for everybody is AI. Are you guys using AI much in your day to day? I mean, how is that changing brokerage or the marketing of it or packaging, et cetera?
Yeah, I know the marketing team is being strategic in how they're using AI. And I can't tell you for sure, although something that I'm surprised that I appreciate so much about AI, given my background in writing. My husband's also an editor. I think AI is a great tool for cleaning up how we communicate with each other. So we make sure everything that we send out is very clean. But even the brokers I work with, our emails are concise, they're direct. Like it's great to be in a time in history where people aren't muddling through what they're trying to say to each other, at least when they're typing.
I like to write, and I'm sure you like to write, and I think I'm a good writer, and I'm sure you are a very good writer. But not everybody is, and I know I have somebody who works on my team on doing leasing or my apartment buildings and otherwise, who's like a classic salesperson who would joke, "Hey, they got through college, but barely," kicking and screaming with lots of beer and partying and not a whole lot of English grammar. And AI has been a total game changer for him. I mean, like
Yeah.
every email he writes is written by AI, and I don't really find a need to, but I even find it useful that AI is kind of cleaning up your like making word shortage suggestions and other cleanup
Yeah.
things tools because I tend
Yeah.
to be a little long-winded in my writing, so it's been helpful to instill some brevity.
And we put together an off-market offer with a group, a client of mine and it's a complex offer, and we've been negotiating for over a year, and we're not getting far. And we used AI to just put it into a concise kind of proposal format with
Hmm.
graphs, and it wasn't overdone, but it just adding that visual aspect, and it was time efficient. It didn't mean that I needed to use the marketing team for a week to put this whole proposal together. That was super useful. What I don't think it's useful for yet, I'm starting to see a lot of people trying to use it instead of an attorney.
Yeah, it's not useful for that. I'm a trained attorney and I practiced law for, I don't know, 8 or 9 years. And it makes a lot of mistakes in that
Yes.
way. It doesn't have a very good contextual ability yet. One of the great things about a good lawyer is they have experience, right? And so they can, they can look at the law and apply it as AI would do. And I think sometimes, unfortunately, AI still messes up, makes legal actual mistakes where it's not applying the right code provision, or if it does, it's making a mistake within the code. In fact, I once asked it the building height of one of the zones in DC that I know really well, and the building height happens to be 35 feet, but it used to be 40, and it put 40 feet as the answer. And even though it's 35, that's a critical error, right?
Yeah, that
And
is.
so it certainly is making legal, it's not your lawyer, and it shouldn't be. But what
Yeah.
I find people are using it for is like pretend lawyering, like if they're in a situation where there's a dispute and they say, I talked to my lawyer and they said, these kinds of things. We have a tenant in one of our buildings who sent us something like that. And it was clearly AI and there were a bunch of mistakes. And, it's sort of embarrassing, but people do it.
Yeah. What I'm excited for, but it's not there yet, is research capability. So, not that different than my background in humanities. I spent a lot of my time researching, just
Hmm.
tracking down the history of ownership on a property or researching various code violations or all kinds of things. A lot of the stuff is still behind some kind of firewall. Even if it's public information, you still need to log in, and those sites aren't cooperating with the AI models yet. So,
Yep.
public records, archives, state records, probate, and then pay services like CoStar, those things aren't cooperating with AI yet. So, in my work with AI, I need to kind of like, it's more like we're working together. Like, I go off and hunt down the information that needs a human still to access it, feed that to AI, and then it puts together like the comprehensive reports that I need.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a nice integrative tool. It's a nice way to learn different things, also. I mean, I use it with helping my 12-year-old with his math homework. If he doesn't understand a particular way to do it, I say, like, let's go to AI because I like daddy solved the problem this way when he was your age. And I'll say, like, give us three different ways to solve it. And often he'll see one that resonates with him and it's more, it's effective. So,
Interesting.
how old are your kids now, Hannah?
My oldest is 21. I've got a 19-year-old. Both of them are in college. And then I have a 15-year-old who just started high school this year.
Where do they go to college?
Got one at Rochester Institute of Technology studying
Cool.
computer science, another at the University of Miami studying film production.
Wow,
And
very different fields. Interesting.
yeah, yeah. And my daughter is in this really cool arts magnet that Montgomery County has in Kensington.
What does she do? Like, what's her interest, arts wise?
Well, it's a visual arts magnet, but she's also really into music scene, which also resonates with me as a DC native, because that was also a huge part of the 90s in DC. She is super active in like the local band scene. She puts together these shows. Brian, we need a venue like there
Great.
were back in the 90s, like DC Space and venues like that. We need like a gritty venue where teenagers can have an all ages show.
Yeah, it's a good thought. I mean, where do they do them now?
My basement.
Really? That's funny.
We had 175 teenagers in our house like 2 weeks ago.
No way.
It was
Wow.
crazy. She charged a
That's
dollar per
crazy.
kid. Not all of them paid, and she made $173. So
That's amazing. So
yeah,
who performed? She did or other
her
people?
band and like three or four other bands. There are some amazing bands playing, and these kids are like pissed about a lot of stuff. They have good messages. They're confident in getting it out. They know how to
Wow.
produce their own stuff and put it online, so they have followings. They do
That's real.
great like marketing of their, for themselves. She makes merch for some of these bands and
Well,
sells
sure.
it.
It's easy to make merch these days, right? And I'm sure like with AI and all the other publicly available tools, and like offshore resources, et cetera, like the marketing of this stuff is and packaging is kind of easier than ever. Yeah, I can see how venue could be tough. That's an interesting thought. Yeah, it's good to hear there's like a robust young music scene here.
Yeah, it's great. That's what she's into. We'll see where the world takes her.
Does she
Yeah.
play an instrument or does she sing
She
or what
plays
does she do?
guitar and sings.
Oh, cool. Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. How
And
about
what's
you? How
her
old are your kids?
My kids are 12, 10, and 6. I have two boys that are the older ones, and then my daughter is 6. And when you were talking about the minivan and driving them in places, I was having a call with my mother on the way into the office this morning, talking about how my daughter wants me to take her to basketball, and my 10-year-old wants me to take him to basketball, and they're at the same time, and I'm not sure who to take. And I'm going to spend half the day thinking about can I go to my daughter's for half the time and then my son for half the time. Even though
Yeah.
between us, watching a 10-year-old AAU practice is a lot more enjoyable than a six-year-old practice, but she's awfully cute and pretty good for her age. So.
That's
Uh,
awesome.
yeah, so it's good. It's really good fun. My boys get to hear a lot more about lending, because I own, Congressional Capital and loan structures than they could ever possibly want in car rides, but they're learning a lot for sure. And
Yeah.
they often ask me how like borrower A is doing or how borrower B is doing,
I
which is
love that.
pretty cute. Your kids know much about your business?
It's funny. I think they know the names of some of my frequent clients are like household names.
Uh-huh. Oh, totally.
And the buildings really interest them. I mean, that's something that's so cool about the industry that we work in. So, we just, as we are driving and moving around the city, the tapestry of the city is like my workplace. And so I'm like, oh, something really cool is coming over here. Or, oh, I'm working on
Totally.
selling this and it's going to become this. They really like that.
I've had that experience many times where I'm driving the city with my kids and I say, "Oh, Dad owns that building, or I own that building, or I put a loan on that building, or I had a loan there." It's a neat thing to do. You do see the changing fabric of the city. Like I'm really excited about what's going to happen in Hill East with the new stadium site. I
Yeah.
own some real estate in that portion of DC. I love the Hill. I used to live on the Hill. Our firstborn lived in our house on the Hill for a year, and I think that's going to be really a special, cool, revitalization moment, for the city.
Yeah.
And it's neat to kind of drive around and see that.
I agree. I also think so, I do a lot of work in Prince George's County where
Yep.
your flex industrial building is. I
Yep.
also see that as an area that is poised for some really exciting change. The county rezoned a lot of the formerly industrial area
Mm-hmm.
of especially inside the Beltway for mixed
Mm-hmm.
use. And I don't know about you, but again, growing up here, I've always been jealous of other cities like Baltimore that have just like a lot of industrial stock.
Mm-hmm.
It's so visually, it's so exciting, and there's so much
Mm-hmm.
potential for how it can be reused. And we've
Yep.
never had much here in DC, but
No, no, we haven't. Yeah.
a lot of it, I think I heard like, I don't know, like 45% of it is concentrated inside of the Beltway in Prince George's County. A lot of it is
It
there.
doesn't surprise me at all. Yeah.
And a lot of that has been rezoned neighborhood activity center, which
Mm-hmm.
means that some of those grittier industrial uses, mostly auto service, are technically no longer allowed. They're going to be phased out. If you have a UNO for that use now, you can keep doing business, but nobody can come in and assume your UNO. You can't transfer that. Next user is going to need to be compatible with more
Yep.
general mixed use. It also allows a lot of like up to 90 feet in height. I mean, a lot of
Wow.
development and density. And slowly, some other projects that need to happen to support that, sidewalk improvements, parking, those kinds of things are slowly starting to work their way through the pipeline. But
Mm-hmm.
I look at areas like where your warehouse is,
Yeah.
and I'm so excited about the potential of what can be there.
Do you see like, money coming in that direction? Are people buying those sites? Is there much demand, or is it just early still? I mean, what do you see happening? Or is sort of the thing of what's going on in DC, it's sort of, emanating to Prince George's County?
Yeah, well, I definitely see prospectors from DC looking over the line and they're like, wow, 800 feet from the DC border, the prices are, two-thirds, half of what they would be
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
side. And it's great stock. But I see like the first signs of change. I see
Mm-hmm.
some artists who are able to acquire their own buildings. I see some nonprofits who are able to acquire properties and then program them for, to try to encourage economic development. I see opportunity basically, and I see a few groups who have their ear to the ground, who are paying attention, who are interested. But I have a warehouse I just brought to market last week. It's been a contractor's warehouse, typical use for something like that, a use that's no longer allowed in the new zoning. It's
Mm-hmm.
a nice, clean 8,000 square foot warehouse, and we're aggressively marketing it to users who are compatible with the new use. It's also in a gateway arts district. So there are
Mm-hmm.
incentives for arts groups to come in, different grants, different tax benefits, stuff like that. And we'll see if we get that type of user looking at it. It will be interesting.
So what do you think the ultimate buyer of that site is, or it's too hard to tell?
I think the ultimate buyer of that site is like a light industrial user who is somehow arts adjacent, is the ideal buyer, like a supplier of some
Yeah.
kind, or maybe like a ceramic studio that has like heavy equipment.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to have some classes, things like that. I think if you ask me that same question in 5 years, not maybe even sooner, three, It's
Hmm.
going to be a restaurant that wants to be in this area where those users are based,
Yeah, totally.
or
Yeah.
a gym, or even a daycare who recognizes that it feels like a safe and clean enough area, and you're 1 mile from the DC border,
Yeah.
close to more residential areas, and there's a development that's slated to come in the next couple years.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So you see the change happening, and yeah, that's interesting. So the opportunities that you see in the marketplace or stuff like that right now, is that kind of where you see it happening?
That's one of the areas that I'm most excited about because of the zoning change. Because of two things. Because of the stock, that
Yep.
rare industrial stock, and it's
Hmm.
smaller industrial stock. We're talking about warehouses that are between 1,000 and 10,000 square feet. They're not huge.
Yep.
And the zoning change, those two things together, and the proximity to DC present a really
Yeah,
exciting opportunity.
yeah, absolutely. Is there anything you'd like to see the Prince George's County or the district do more of to kind of encourage development, encourage the change that you'd like to see?
I'm sure everybody answers that question the same. I mean, the approval process for
Yeah.
project needs to be streamlined. We have a 20-acre site, raw land on the market right now. It's smack in between two new Purple Line stations.
Hmm.
And we've had a lot of interest from developers, but the risk of going through years of entitlements only to go before the council for your site plan review and have it shot down is too high.
Yeah, totally.
And I talked to developer after developer who have invested in the county, for some of them for decades, and they just can't find a way to take on that risk to go through that process.
Yeah, and it's really an unfair ask of the count of these municipalities, right? I mean, the idea that somebody would invest, their time and treasure into something with such levels of uncertainty, and in fact, when the process takes so long, it's so expensive. It really shouldn't be that hard to get a meeting with somebody who says, "Look, if you do A, B, and C, you're going to get the result that you want, or something that's proximate to that result,"
Mhm.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's not really a fair thing. I will say, like, in DC, the Office of Planning does a nice job of, if you're trying to make some sort of zoning change, you meet with them and you say, "Hey, I want to take this particular site and I want to go from this to this. Is that something you would, support?" And they're really straightforward and they say, "Yeah, we'll support it," or, "We won't support it." And that's really helpful. But, to be subject to the council and, like, go through 2, 3 years and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on lawyers and engineers and architects, and then have the council say, "Sorry, you can't do that." I mean,
Mhm.
that's too big of a hill to climb, I think. So that leaves your client with, a site that they can't sell, or, they have to take it through the process themselves, take that risk in order to get a bigger payday down the line, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, interesting. So what do you like the best about what you do every day? Like, what gets you excited?
I love being on the ground with the people, the owners, the buyers, the architects, sometimes the government officials, everybody in the same room, and envisioning what the buildings can be and making a plan for it to actually happen. I love the people, I love the buildings. One of my happiest moments will be just touring a property with a buyer and their architect and digging into all the corners and crawling through the attic and figuring out, what.
Totally. The potential, like, it is like a special, exciting thing when you look at a building, you see its potential, and like, you're gonna be a part of that, and then you start thinking about it and the ideas change, and no, it is definitely a fun thing. What don't you like about what you do?
I think one of the hardest parts has been just really understanding what it means for everything to be so speculative. The levels of risk that your clients are taking on, the buyers are taking on, and the lenders, and that I'm taking on. At first it was, having had other careers, salary jobs, it was liberating to come into a field where it just felt like every day, like, okay, what do we need to get things done? Let's go.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
then
yeah.
at some point I'll get paid fine, but you don't even need to worry about that. That'll
Yeah,
happen.
it's gonna come. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. But then you wise up and you're like, wow, I just spent like a year working on that and it didn't work. And
Yeah, yeah.
that time is gone. And I made a lot of sacrifices, worked late, went in on the weekend, whatever, and there won't be any pay for that. So I've had to learn
That
some hard
level,
lessons
that
about.
lack of control, I think, in brokerage is really tough, right? I mean, you're at the whim
Mhm.
of your client. The one thing that you don't realize in a good market, you sort of think you have more control and power than you do. And when the market changes, you realize that there's some certain things that are bigger than you, the market conditions, et cetera. Because in a good market, a lot of the stuff that you're selling that you've been working on for a long time sells much more quickly. The return on your time is much higher, et cetera. But, I think one thing that's tough about brokerage, and I've always, thought about this, is that, your client could have that land listed and do it for a month and say, you know what, or 2 months, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. And, and pull it. Or, you can have that flex industrial building that's, 8,000 feet or whatever, and there can be no buyers because of the change in, the fact that like the user that's there today, isn't the user for tomorrow, and people can't see the future that you can see, et cetera. And because of the risk they're taking and the uncertainty of what they may see that future as being, your time may not be rewarded, right? And so that can be tough.
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, this career for me has been timed pretty much exactly with the slowdown. So I have yet to
Totally.
experience a strong market. It's a great time to be learning, I guess, but I'm ready to see things change.
Yeah, it is a great time to learn. Although I will, it's they always say that sort of about brokerage and about mortgage lending, et cetera. Because I've had some friends say, "Hey, what do you think my son, who's real, salesy, should do?" And I always talk about mortgage lending, and it's good to learn kind of when things are slower. But you've been doing it long enough that it'd be nice to have an easier market where you put things on and there's a lot of hot money and things are moving. What was the first deal you ever did?
The first sale transaction that I did, something I'm really proud of. I'm really excited about this one. It was with client David Fogel. He owns Bump and Grind Coffee. He also owns a music label.
Oh, cool.
And he's very loyal to Silver Spring, which is where he lives with his family. And he wanted to purchase a property to build out as his restaurant and a music venue.
Mm-hmm.
But he also wanted to find a seller who was willing to carry the note. And
Mm-hmm.
that's more popular right now, but this was 2021 and was not something that a lot of people were talking about. We went after a lot of off-market opportunities and eventually found an old house in an industrial area. There are very few industrial areas inside the Beltway in Montgomery County, but one of them is like smack on the border with DC in Silver Spring, Pelham Road, Philadelphia Avenue. I don't know if you've ever been back in that little pocket. It's really cool. Little
Mm-hmm.
warehouses, little garages, and then a few single family homes that are used for commercial uses. This had been an office.
Mm-hmm.
And we made a great deal with the seller, and the seller was willing to carry the note. And David's project is underway right now. It's nearing completion. I think it's supposed to be done by the summer. It's going to be a really cool venue, just a little bit off the beaten path, but I feel like he's kind of the pioneer. And the rest of this industrial area, maybe we're going to start to see some interesting commercial uses sprinkled in
Mm-hmm.
with
Mm-hmm.
his destination being there. He's like 1 block off Georgia Avenue, not even a whole block off Fenton Street, but just hidden a little bit in this industrial area.
How big of a building is it? Do you know?
It's about 3,000 square feet, and then it has a nice big parking lot behind it that it's blocked in by garages, and so it almost feels like a private little courtyard in the center of downtown Silver Spring.
Cool, cool. So he's going to do music and coffee and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Very cool. Maybe your daughter will play there sometime.
I
That'd be
know,
fun.
yeah. Maybe that's the venue for her that we've been looking for.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Does your daughter aspire to like play professionally? I mean, to have her, or do you think it's more of a high school, kind of thing?
I think it's probably more of a high school thing. If I had to see if there's a through line to the future here, I think it would be as some kind of like promoter and organizer. She's very
Fun,
good. Yeah,
fun.
at that. Yeah.
Is she involved in politics or no?
No, I mean she's mad about a lot of stuff,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
she's
totally. She's yeah, totally fired up, and she's been inspired to act and to talk, et cetera, but hasn't
yeah,
gotten directly involved yet. A little young for
yeah.
that, perhaps, but it's great to passion is a good thing, and so is energy. So I'm glad to hear that she has that. So what do you see as kind of your next step in your career and sort of the future of what's coming in the line of work that you're in?
I am really excited. I love working with small business owners like David Fogel, who I was telling you about. I am excited to start working with more local developers taking on small projects.
Hmm.
One of them, I have a client in Hyattsville who I helped her. It was a long process. 2 years off market purchased the old Masonic Lodge in the center of
Okay.
Hyattsville. And she's doing a really interesting adaptive reuse project there, putting food and beverage in the former ballroom and then building out the rest of the lodge as these loft-like apartments. And
Wow.
yeah, I'd love to work with more developers like that doing interesting adaptive reuse projects. At some point, I'd love to kind of get my hands dirty and get more involved doing like project management
It
on
seems that
development
way. Yeah, it
projects.
seems that way. I was
Yeah.
going to ask you if you thought of doing some development work yourself or being sort of inside the walls for development projects.
Ultimately, that's what I aspire to do.
Yeah, and I think many developers actually started in brokerage, including my father, who did brokerage at one point and then did development. And he always thought, he would always tell people it's a great way to kind of start because you see part of it in brokerage, but there's nothing like being kind of under the hood and working on it day to day. And the first development projects that you do on your own, my first one in DC was a 7 unit condo project many years ago. You never forget it. The experience of the architect, the smell of the wood as they're cutting wood
Mhm.
on site, to framing up the building and the drywall and everything else. It really is a special experience. So sounds like you love the revitalization of urban areas and the creative components of it. And so I think being
Absolutely.
inside it would be a lot of fun. What advice would you give to a young person coming out of college who wants to end up doing, brokerage and or development?
It's funny you ask. I literally had this conversation with such a person yesterday. Number one is get out there and talk to a lot of people like me and you and understand what the day to day is like. For this person I was speaking to yesterday, I think a great way to enter the field and not have to work for free, frankly, is to do property management.
Yeah,
I
true.
think that's a great way to, like you said, get under the hood and
Yep.
understand how buildings work, and also have the opportunity to speak with the investors whose livelihoods rely on a building performing properly and understand that component of what they need ultimately in delivery of a building.
I think
I
I think it's a great thing. I think it's a great way to
yeah,
do it, because you learn about, the client customer service with the client, you learn about customer service with the tenants, you learn about the what makes a building tick in terms of, the mechanics of it, the plumbing, the electric, the HVAC, the systems, and what's serious or what isn't serious, the
yeah.
importance of maintenance and everything else. I think it's a great thing for sure.
And then just get out there and walk the city, walk the neighborhoods, really understand the buildings, watch what's happening, watch, why is this shop not open when they're supposed to be? And what's
Yeah.
happening there? How long have they been there? What should that building be? Who owns it?
Yeah.
Just get to know the place where you live.
Yeah, I used to, when I lived on the hill, kind of in the early days of my lending and development businesses, I would jog around the city and I'd have a notebook with me and I'd write down addresses or, I'd write them in my phone and it was a really important part of what I was doing. I mean, it gave us properties to target, but also, you feel the fabric of the city and where things are moving, et cetera. It's really critical. I think being in there and seeing it and touching it and feeling it's important. And I think for young people, if they're going to, be in development or be in property management or be in leasing brokerage in DC, live in DC, and feel kind of the fabric of the city. What's your thought on where the city is today, in terms of the climate?
That's a hard question for me to answer. It shouldn't be, right? Because I've lived here my whole
Yeah.
life. I'll say that the last year has kind of spooked me. I have taken it for granted again my entire life that this city is recession proof.
Yeah.
The industry that we have here is an industry that is never going to quit cranking and performing at the same government. That's changing. But I will say, having kind of started to reconcile myself to that, I see incredible resilience
I
here.
do too.
I see that in the close-in suburbs where I do a lot of work in Prince George's County, Montgomery County. People aren't selling their homes and leaving. It's still
Yeah.
people are still supporting their local restaurants and coffee
Yep.
shops. I'm pretty excited about some of these government buildings being sold off.
Yeah.
Excited to see what happens. So I don't know. I'm seeing some opportunity.
Yeah, I feel pretty similarly. I mean, I think I feel almost exactly how you feel. I mean, I feel like it has been resilient. I agree with you. It's not like you walk around, Arlington, where where I live or the close in suburbs, and you see for sale signs everywhere and people running for the hills. And, I think the government workers have been resilient in terms of finding other things to do. And I think it's been a really tough time for the city, but I think it's going through a transition. But there's also positive forces here. I mean, there's a lot more job sort of diversity than there was in the past. When I was a little kid, it was sort of a government town, and now it's kind of an everything town. I mean, there's tech
Mhm.
jobs, more and more. I think Amazon coming here to Northern Virginia was helpful. It's a sort of a more topically diverse, job market than it used to be. And so I
Mhm.
think that certainly helps alleviate some of the issues that Doge created and otherwise. But, I think like a lot of things, there just needs to be sort of an optimism and a positive momentum to the story. My sort of pitch is always, the district needs to do things to incent employers to reside in the city. Like do tax incentive, do whatever you have to do. But there's no reason why we shouldn't drive down K Street and drive down some of the other big boulevards in DC and see Microsoft and Apple and OpenAI and whatever the companies of the day are. I mean, there should be a way to incent the great companies of our time to be in the capital of the free world. It's never made any sense to me that you don't see them here. And I think if you're going to have job losses on the government side, then the District of Columbia, it's incumbent upon them to get private companies to pick up the slack.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talking about driving into downtown also reminds me of another aspect I'm excited about of the future, and that is all of the effect of all of these office to residential conversions that have been underway since COVID. My whole life, the downtown has just been pretty dead, right? At night
Yeah,
and on the
yeah, yeah,
weekends.
yeah.
Pretty boring. You had to know where to go to find something interesting. And then there's been some recent developments, but Navy Yard is so exciting. But I can't wait to see people downtown all the time with their
Yeah.
dogs and their families and just to see life down there, like a real
Yeah,
city.
I agree. And I hope that the district realizes that the only way you can fill up all those buildings is if you get real employment here. And
Yeah.
so, you really have to have a reason for young people from all across the country and from universities to want to be here, and people of all age groups to live in the city. It's a great place. It's a vibrant place, but the government needs to support it properly. And
Mhm.
so I hope it does. So let me ask you something, and this is something I'm starting to do. If you had one question that you wanted to ask the next guest, who presumably will be in real estate in some kind, what would it be? Any question?
I would be interested in hearing from other brokers what they think needs to change in the field of brokerage
That's a great
because
question.
I think the field's been, by and large, with a few exceptions, and I'm proud to say I think Feldman Rule is one of them, but it's been operating the same way for a long time.
Yeah.
And there are some interesting ways that it could be refreshed, and I'd be curious to know, especially from people who've been in the industry longer than myself, what do you see as ways that the industry could be improved?
Well, what do you see as ways it can be improved?
I don't know. One of the this was on my mind because I had spoken to this college student yesterday who's so excited to enter the field. There's just such a firm barrier to entry with the way it's structured, where it's commission based, it's fee based. Who
Yeah.
can out of college, especially with what college costs, who can go work for free and hope it works out? Only somebody who can live at home and carry that.
It's an interesting thing because one of the things as an employer an owner of a small business that I've come to realize over time is that when you think about what you're paying people who work for you, once you start to really care about them as humans, meaning there's been some time, you think, well, shit, how can they live on that amount of money, right? And then
Yeah.
then you start increasing their salary because they do a good job, and B, you want to make sure that they can live comfortably. That on the weekends they can go to a restaurant or they can go see live music or whatever. And I do think it's sort of an unfair marketplace when you have young people who are, and think about how self-selecting it is, right? Like the only people that can work for a brokerage are people of affluence, right? Because they're living presumably with their affluent parents, or their parents are paying for their rent, and that's not something you want, right? What
Yes.
you want is ideation and excitement and energy and creativity and all the things that come with diversity, right? And so yeah, that's an interesting point, and I think the structure is something that really should change in that way.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. Something we've done a couple times here at Feldman Rule is brought people in sort of a hybrid role where they're recent graduates. They work in property management for part of the week, so they're getting a salary for that. And then they're
Yep.
working in brokerage the other part of the week where, there's the potential of a bonus here or there if they're working on a project, maybe with a more senior agent. The ramping up is slower because your time is divided, but at least you have a baseline of income. Because I couldn't agree with you more. You need to live in the city. You need to be able
You do.
to
Yeah.
go to the buildings that are thriving and support the local businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's a good way to do it for sure. And it's nice that within the realm of Feldman Rule that you all do have property management and you have brokers, so you can have a bit of like I always think of it as what like the big firms call it like a wheel program, where you work in one portion of the firm and the other portion, and then you figure out like what you really like, and the firm figures out what you're good at, and you kind of have that meeting a year later saying, "Hey, we realized that this is what works and this is what doesn't work. Let's do this." That's pretty neat. Do you have any young folks that work for you directly or no right now?
No,
Or yeah.
we're really collaborative here. So I'm teaming up with other brokers in the firm all the time on different projects, but I don't have anybody who works for me.
Interesting. All right. Well, I've enjoyed spending more time with you and learning your story. Thank you for the time today. I guess I'll tell everybody else about one thing that I think is interesting that Feldman Rule does, or Ian does. He has I guess, a weekly hockey game in the mornings. I know that it's open to people in the real estate business. It's a great way to kind of meet and mingle. In fact, I introduced a friend of mine to the game who isn't in real estate, but apparently is a good goalie. And so he plays now, and he's become friends with Ian. But I think it's a great collaborative thing, and I think for young people out there who are looking for jobs and who may see this, I think Feldman Rule is a great place to work with really good people and in a dynamic place. But Ian and then Gabe, who runs the property management side, are great people, and as you can see, Hannah's a great person. So definitely check it out. But thanks again for your time. I'd love to see your daughter play music sometime. So
Awesome.
keep me posted. I'll bring my 12-year-old. I'm sure he would love it.
Awesome.
So would
Yeah.
yeah, my 10-year-old might too. And they may be, I'm sure they're aggressive, and they're aggressive with what they say, but living in my house, he's heard it all anyway. So it'll be fun.
Great.
Thanks. And to pay homage to your minivan hauling of the kids around, that'll be me tonight. So I'm gonna figure out a way to watch a 6-year-old play basketball and a 12-year-old or 10-year-old in the same evening. So
That's awesome. Good luck. It's been great talking with
thanks.
you, Brian.
Nice talking to you too.
Thank
Take
you.
care.